all I did was cook and cook and cook. On my days off, I read books and watch videos about cooking, really taking your own education in your own hands, and so that you're prepared for the day that you actually have to perform at work and like research about all the things that you see at work, even if it's like what's shishito pepper or what's hose on.
You're listening to the Taste Podcast. I'm Editor-in-Chief Matt Rodbard, here with Senior Editor Anna Hezel.
Today on the show, we have Max Un, the executive chef at Momofuku's Ssam Bar. Later on, Matt speaks with the editors of coffee magazine Sprudge, authors of the book The New Rules of Coffee. Matt, who is Max? Usually when we hear about Momofuku, we think of David Chang. Tell me about Max.
Right, so David Chang's famous restaurant, Ssam Bar, it's about 10 years old. Okay, Max is the chef there, but you probably have never heard of Max because he's kind of a modest guy. And really, I've been going to Ssam Bar for years and years, and the last year and a half or so, I've been like, this is the best Ssam Bar has ever been. He's doing these inspired dishes that kind of reflect his background living in Singapore, dishes like shrimp toast, shellfish ensemble, whole fish steamed in banana leaves. But we also get into his journey to the United States, which is really interesting.
What was that like?
Okay, so he's cooking in Singapore, and he's like a legit David Chang fanboy. He admits this. He bought the Momofuku cookbook and studied it. So from day one, he wanted to work at Momo. So what did he do? He moves to the United States, and he enrolls at the CIA, the Culinary Institute of America, which is like the Harvard of cooking schools. So when it comes time to apply for externships, of course, he wanted to work at Momofuku. He interviewed there. Does he get the externship at Momofuku? No. But this story, Anna, has a happy ending.
Here's Matt talking to Max Un.
Max Un, thank you for joining the Taste Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Well, I wanted to have you on the podcast. I've been into Ssam. I think I've been going there for a decade at least. You're a decade old, so probably since the beginning. But I'm such a fan of what you've been doing for the last year. I mean, legitimately a fan.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's been a journey, and it's throughout the whole time just trying to figure out, even through like coming to the U.S., just thinking about what I want to do, you know.
So your story is really, really cool. You grew up in Singapore, and then you went to the CIA, Culinary Institute of America.
Yeah, in upstate.
Yeah, upstate New York. So what was that direct from Singapore to the CIA? Was there a culture shock? Like, that's a small ass town up there.
Yeah, I guess everyone in Singapore kind of get a little taste of America just by watching television. So I remember like growing up, my mom would be watching Friends, and I would be like sleeping to the hum of Friends in the background. So there was a little bit of American like upbringing, I guess, through TV, but there was definitely like a different vibe to how things are done here. People talk. So I kind of had to work into that.
So how old were you?
I was 25, 26.
Oh, wow. Let's actually go back a little bit further. I didn't realize that you were 25 when you moved. So you were working in restaurants in Singapore?
Yeah, I was working in like modern French fine dining kind of restaurant. Back then it was with the Les Amis group, and then with Chef Galvin with like him and El Jardin. So that was my foot into like fine dining world. And about 3.5 years later, I was just asking myself, all right, what am I gonna do next? You know, so it's either trying to open a sandwich shop in like the business district in Singapore and like maybe do something, or try something else out. So
you went to the Harvard of culinary world in America.
It's more about like it was before that was flipping through like a Momo book at a friend's house, and someone was saying, "Oh yeah, this person in New York, he was getting 2 stars by selling ramen," but that was like obviously not the case. It was just like it was cold. I got 2 stars, so I was like looking through the book. I was like intrigued, and I started watching like videos on Dave and Momofuku, and I was like, okay, you know.
So let me get this straight. I think I get the picture here. You were in Singapore. You went to the CIA with the sole purpose of working at Momofuku.
Yes, that's totally the intention. There was no way to come into the U.S. like legit without like a student visa or a work visa. So the work visa thing is a little tough because you need to know someone before you can get hired. So yeah, I came in just to want to work for Momofuku, work for Dave, and tried to try this new thing out. It was like good food, like at a higher level, but more affordable, more casual. Anyone could come in. Doesn't matter, yeah.
This is a cool story. I want to continue talking about the progression because you went and did your externship with Momofuku. You ended up getting that externship. Was there an interview process, or were they like, did you tell them the story like, I came to the CA just to work for you guys, so take me, please?
I think back then it was a very different time, and I was trying to send a ton of email to HR at Momofuku. I went to the career fair. There was the chef there. Back then, it was Peter Sopico. I had this goofy little portfolio I made. It was like really goofy. I was like,
was it like your food that you'd cook, photos of it?
Like, because before that, I was like doing like food competitions and stuff. I was like, all right, these are the food that, like, trying to show that I'm like proactive, whatever. And I gave it to him, and he kind of like handed it back to me. And he said like, I don't really care. So I was like, oh God, how am I gonna work for Momofuku? So after like 20 emails and talking to a few people, I even went to Ko to eat lunch back then.
Oh man.
And gave them my resume and all that, and like nothing. And I was just like, fuck it, I'm just gonna come down. I walked into Ssam Bar with a backpack with my knives and my chef coat on a Saturday afternoon. It was busy as hell. And I walked up to the pass with my resume. I said, like, I demand a trail. I really want to work here. And I got my knife, and I just like kept talking. I was like, I have a knife in my bag, my stuff in my bag. I'm just gonna come and chill right now. And the chef at the pass back then was like, whoa, slow down. This is a fucking Saturday. You walk in, you try to demand a trail. It's not happening right now. Come back next week. I was like, okay, cool.
And you were like, that's a glimmer of hope. Come back next week.
Because I can't deal with the what ifs, Like, I can't deal with, like, regret. That's why I have no tattoos on me right now, I guess. But I had to know for sure, like, I either get a solid no, I can move on, or I give it a shot.
Max, you are made for this industry. Just your drive, just like hearing you talk about the story and the success that you've had since. I mean, it's clear that you really have the right point of view. You just work hard, prove yourself, but you got to be driven, right?
Yeah, you're just going to want it. You want to will it to the point that, like, at least you give it a shot. And, like, I always say, control what you can, and you can't control anyone else, but control what you can, and anything else will fall into place. If it doesn't, then move on.
This feels very David Chang, circa 2004. Just as an observer of his career, 2005, like early on, just reading about it and knowing kind of his place in the industry, this echoes his sentiment. Like, get shit done, focus, put your head down, and work.
Yeah, I mean, I try to do whatever that it takes to bring me to where I need to be, and I'm sure Dave thinks the same way. But yeah, we just want the best for ourselves and for the people around us, and that's all. I think for most part, I personally, from Singapore with like typical like Asian parents, are driven by shame, and I always tell myself like, all right, my mom and dad wanted me to be like the engineers, the lawyers, the doctors, or take over my dad's business, and I said no to that, and I told myself, like, my dad's been a great dad to me and my family, so it was something that if I chose to do this, I have to be better than him. If not, I just wasted an opportunity in life. So
let's go back to the narrative, the Max Ang narrative. You do the trail, get the gig.
Yeah.
And you start working your way up at Momofuku Ssam Bar. Are you making like, how many pork buns are you making a night? Like, give me a number.
No, it was fuzzy. I can't even remember. All I hear was just like a slew of orders from Matt. Matt was like the chef de cuisine back then, and he really pushed the pace, which I really enjoy, and I really like thankful for that, because that was my first look into a New York experience, and finally you get it. Like, okay, it doesn't matter what you do out in the rest of the world at that point. Like, when they say New York experience, that's like pretty much it. You push the pace and you just feed the crowd, and all you hear is just like buns, buns, buns. And then back then it was just I was an extern, I guess, but thankfully I had some experience behind me, so it didn't feel like too much of a shock. But still, it was tough for sure.
What was give us an example of some of the dishes that you were putting out, like in the quantities? Like how many bossams were you doing a night?
Bossams we range for at least like 4 to 8 a night. That's and you see your other like teammates just like crushing it, and you be like, I can't be worse than anyone else, because it's a team. You can't like lose focus for 1 second, because if I back up, it's everyone else in the shit with me because of me, and you never want that to be on your shoulders, and you want to like carry your weight with the team. So that was like a driving force for sure.
So you rise at Ssam, but then you go over to Momofuku Ko, right? And you rise to the chef de cuisine at Ko.
Yeah.
How long were you at Ko?
I was at Ko for 3.5 years, and like to be honest, I was never supposed to be in the country for that long. After being on a student visa at 1 year to work, and I told myself, all right, I'm gonna get this 2 Michelin star belt under my belt, and go back to Singapore, find another job, yada yada yada. And I thought I'll be like, okay, I'm just gonna cut my teeth and go back home. And for the first 4 months, it was, I felt I was doing the worst job ever. I always just felt like utter like rubbish for my first 4 months. I was like, shit, I'm gonna get fired. Back then it was Sean Gray, it was Josh Pinsky, Carrie Hines. They were my chefs, and I mean, they were like really helping me like as much as they could without trying to like physically help me. But it's all boils down to myself. So I really try to push myself all the time, man.
So you succeeded and you made it. You went past that year, right?
But yeah, halfway through, I decided like if I wanted to stick with Momofuku, I had to like invest in myself, and like so I sunk like $7,000 into like getting an attorney, like getting obscure like visa that like most people had a 50-50 chance of getting. So it was just $7,000 for a chance. So
wow. So I think the perception for some is that if you work at a restaurant or you're employed, they'll sponsor you, but clearly that's not how it works. And you had to invest in yourself.
Yeah.
Very admirable. I have a great admiration for you for taking that step and making that investment. Yeah, I think it was probably very stressful for you. You're modest and you're not saying that. But then, you had your immigration, you had your papers in place. You could then work at Ko, and you rose there. Tell me some things that you learned at Ko for the 3.5 years there.
Yeah. I guess working at Ko, it's like no matter at any level that you start in, you probably start at the bottom anyway as a commis, but even at that point, you need to like have the focus of being your own man, your own person. You know, you can't like think, all right, someone's going to bail me out, someone's going to help me. But it's not that there won't be any help, but with that kind of like thought process, it will help you like build yourself for the next level, upon next level, and be seriously super proactive. Always take your own education at your own hands. I came in to US like no friends, no family, so all I did was cook and cook and cook. On my days off, I read books and watch videos about cooking. So it's really taking your own education in your own hands, and so that you're prepared for the day that you actually have to perform at work, and like research about all the things that you see at work. Even if it's like what's shishito pepper or what's hoson, why. And at that point, I think Dave had like the whole Harvard series out, and I would just watch all that.
You absorbed all the video.
Yeah.
So at this time, let's talk about Dave. You bring him up. Now, you're clearly doing well, and you're working at Ko. You've run in the industry. Is he mentoring you? Is he teaching you aside? I know he's got many employees and a very busy life, but what was it like? What was your relationship like with Dave?
Yeah, at the beginning, it was just like I was like clearly a fanboy, but I was trying to keep my composure and just like, all right, to me, it's just work. I have to work, focus, and then everything else will speak for itself. But Dave has always been a mentor to me on top of like my chefs that I work with, like Sean and Josh. So like even back then at Ssam, it was Matt Rudofka that really like mentored me. But I think in many aspects, in the wide perspective of like looking at food in the wider scope of things, Dave managed to always I always take heed from his advice, because he's out there looking at everything out there that he's seeing, all the chefs that are doing their stuff. And he's always have really different perspective. Mm-hmm. And even though it somewhat didn't make sense at some point, I told myself like, there's a reason why he's saying the things that he say.
Give me an example of like some advice that he gave you, like straight up, like a good David Chang story.
There's a lot of Dave stories, but I remember at one point at Co, I was like CDC at Co, and I think there was a point that I and my two other sous chefs were doing our thing and trying to put on dishes, and Dave came in and he ate it, and I think he was like questioning me specifically, like it was definitely more aggressive, but it was
the wordage was a little more aggressive.
Yeah, but I took it in, like I was just like listening to what he had to say, and it just carried me throughout the whole time ever since that point. Like every dish have to mean something to me, like I would agree, like there are thousands of chefs out in this city that are great chefs, great cooks, and we all can cook good food, hopefully, thankfully that we can like cook delicious food. But what's the next step, It has to mean something to all of us.
And to rise to the pinnacle that you are at Co, which is one of the most regarded restaurants in all of New York, and like that responsibility of doing the daily menu, I mean, you are setting yourself apart from those thousands of chefs that you speak of.
Yeah, Dave would give me like one-on-one lessons sometimes, just like talking about food, and that one thing that kind of carried me as well was the Venn diagram, kind of the overlap of like two different cultures or subcultures, and when you bring in the third Venn diagram like circle, like it kind of changes the dynamic of the dish. So how that would,
such as Zen master David Chang, it feels very like Phil Jackson, legendary basketball coach style.
Yeah, and he and those small little things just kind of like help me think about food a little bit more, and I'm sure like there's more for me to think about. Okay,
so I want to talk about the moment you were asked or told, or I'm not sure how it went down, but you were going to be the guy at Momofuku Ssam, which to me is the crown jewel of all of Momofuku. It's the one I go to the most. It's people travel for it. It's legendary. What was that like?
Oh, it's I think it was like a surreal moment, and I couldn't believe that they would like ask for me to like take on that huge responsibility, and it was like full circle for me, through even like flipping through the books of Momofuku for the first time in Singapore like 8-9 years ago, and then to this point, it's been a huge like humbling experience. But all I felt was like, okay, it means a lot in my heart. Obviously, it has been a really successful restaurant throughout the years, and there's so much legacy behind it. What am I supposed to do?
Did you think you could do it?
I wasn't thinking about it, because I knew I was going to have to do it. So whether I can or not, I would have to like try or just die trying.
I want to talk some dishes at Ssam Bar. Right. I mean, Ssam Bar has been kind of historically been broken down into a couple really classic categories. The raw category, ham. It's always been a really robust ham selection. Small plates and large plates. So just let's go through some of the dishes that really is your style of cooking that you've added to like the raw category and maybe some of the larger plates.
Yeah, even when like in the beginning stages of like thinking, all right, what am I supposed to do? I always highly regard what Ssam Bar is really great for, and not just the food, but I think the dynamics of like eating in that restaurant is very like specific to Ssam Bar. and I am immensely proud about American country ham, even though I'm not from the country, not from the US, but I'm just really proud about what American country ham brings to the table, as opposed to like getting prosciutto or like jamon. That is like a huge legacy for me to like carry forward. The large formats has always been a huge thing, but we're already like thinking about tweaking one large format to bring on next, hopefully in a couple months.
What is that? Tell me.
I would only say it'd be seafood large format. It would be a huge undertaking for us because we've only been known to be a meat-centric restaurant. But my focus is like great seafood. You know, I love great seafood.
I have to say, the whole fish I've ordered 3 times, I think, that you've always presented with a very distinct and clear Southeast Asian, flavor, profile, and vibe. It's a go-to for me.
Thanks.
Love it.
The beauty of like Southeast Asian cuisine, a lot of it is like night markets. And I feel like most people, like, you can either choose to go to a restaurant to eat and sit down and order a meal, or just go to a night market and just like make your rounds. And then you're like done. It's like a walking, tasting omakase kind of thing. Like you pick and choose your kind of like adventure. And I think a lot of food, to me, it's based off of that, or like a distinct like nostalgia from like growing up eating food.
Let's talk about the curly corn. I love that dish. It's like I order it every time. Tell me about it. Tell us about it.
Well, it's definitely a thing that stemmed from like night markets. And I mean, I've been to countless on night markets, and the one distinctive smell that you get into every night market, like in Singapore and Taiwan, especially, it's always corn. Either if it's steam on the cob, or like they take off the kernels, they batter it, they fry it, or they roast it like through this like conveyor belt of like barbecue kind of thing, and it's coated with like peanut sauce, and it's the smell is so distinctive. And I think like corn has always been like, even though like subconsciously it's just like in my mind while like growing up, it's like the smell of corn, and it's just like, all right, I was thinking like, dude, I always want to get the corn. I won't be able to get it because my mom would be like, no, we can't. No. Yeah. And it's kind of like based off of that. And
what's the dish? Walk us through it.
The dish is actually whole corn, like broke into quarters, like lengthwise, and it's just simply fried at like 350, and it just
corn spears. I mean, that's the cool thing about it. They look like dill spears,
right?
Which is a very unique way to serve corn.
And I mean, like, everyone has been eating corn on the cob like since the discovery of corn, I believe. And it's just like it kind of curls up and opens up the kernels. So when you do season it, every single kernel is like seasoned evenly as much as possible, and it's just like it dehydrated the corn a little bit to like really caramelize the corn kernels, and it has this like really roasted and sweet flavor, and it's really quick for us to like get the dish on the plate. And I feel like that's really important for running a restaurant like Ssam Bar.
Yeah. And what about the shrimp toast? Clearly that's a very important dish to kind of like the food that you represent.
So when's the last time you had like a Chinese takeout shrimp toast?
Oh man, I think I've had it maybe last year or so, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was my first foray into shrimp toast in the US, and it was by far the worst experience.
Yeah, I'm glad you went there.
Not great.
No,
you could taste the 20 things that was fried before that shrimp toast in the shrimp toast, but it wasn't based off of that dish, but
thank you. I was like, where are you going with this? Because it's not really a great memory.
No, it kind of like propelled me to want to make a shrimp toast that actually wasn't that oily, I guess. It's based off of a few things. It's also part of a night market kind of thing. I was in like Thailand, Phuket, and there was this like lady out in the open with a huge vat of fry oil, just like pinching off like the spicy fish paste and dropping in the fryer, and like she'd be doing like 100 a minute, and I'd be like, yeah, and you just get a packet, you just eat it, ripping hot out of the bag. The smell is intoxicating, and it's all that Venn diagram like thought process again. It's based off like a fish paste steamed in banana leaf dish in Singapore, and it's also in that similar vein, similar texture, and then like a shrimp toast that you get in like Chinese takeout in that kind of format. But it's basically like peeled shrimp with like chilies, like blended Thai basil, blended coriander, lime leaf, and lemongrass, and like you spread it on the toast, and like
it's such a good dish. I've ordered it so many times. It's great. Tell me, Max, like, what do you do when you're not cooking right now in New York? Are you going out to restaurants? I mean, have you made your pilgrimage to Frenchet like every chef? I mean, where are you eating these days, or what are you doing when you're not on the clock?
Yeah, dude. I think that's like a huge question now. We do go out and check out like new spaces, and I think on top of that, like, it's one of my wishes to kind of eat out at all the top restaurants in New York City when I got here. And I realized I'm going to be here for a long haul, like kind of slow down a little bit.
Yeah,
but now it's just going out with my friends and just like having a good time. Most places I go to, it's usually like the Four Horsemen, Alameda, that's in Greenpoint. It's like very like chill spot, but like my boy Nick there is just like doing good food, and it's a good place to hang out. While there, it's like a great place for like natural wine, and like it's always the kind of like food that's not too serious, but it's always high quality.
Yeah, it's like super soigné to use the chef term. Yeah.
And I finally went to like Chef's Table at Brooklyn Fair.
What do you think? Give us your review.
It's all that I ever thought it was gonna be, though. It's really high luxury items, and it's Cesar's like focus is super like razor sharp, and I wouldn't expect any lesser from him for sure. It was really like properly like ultimately executed food at a really high level, and yeah, it was a great time.
I was checking out your Instagram, and you were like out in Kansas, man. Is that?
Oh, right.
I saw like you were at like a gun store. Dude, what is it like? Like Singapore, there's probably, I mean, I know the laws there, they're probably like a little bit different than American laws for guns, and you're out in Kansas. Like, what were you doing in Kansas, and what were you doing in a gun store, and what were you thinking, man?
Well, it was part of a whole trip. Like, I went to Heritage Farms.
Oh, sure. You're visiting farms. Of course you were. Yeah.
Right. And I think Patrick from Heritage Farms was like really awesome. He's just like, hey, Max, you're coming with me, man. Like, we're going out there. And we landed in like Memphis, Tennessee. And we were driving down the road, and everyone was like talking about this like Bass Pro Shop. I was like, what are you talking about? What? I've never been to a Bass Pro Shop. And lo and behold, we were driving down the street. Boom. It was this huge pyramid out in the middle of Memphis, Tennessee. Like blinding. The sun was like at 12 noon. It was blinding. And when you walk in there, it just felt like you were in Jurassic Park. When I went up there was this huge like stack of like boxes. I was like, what is it? And it was like a whole stack of like shotgun shells on sale, like $5.99. Like,
oh, man.
That was the trip to.
That's America.
It is pretty America for me. It's an interesting part. So yeah.
We ask all guests on the Taste Podcast, if you had your own chance to write a cookbook or a food or culinary book or journey, what would it be?
Yeah, it's I think it's to highlight a lot of the other cuisines and like cultures out there that we all enjoy. I think promoting traveling, it's great. I always feel like you gain a wider perspective when you like go out there to travel, and it's always the micro subcultures that really intrigues me. Even though if it's like some weird, funky, fatty like street food in Japan, that no one would have seen other than 3 years later, it's out in the global market because someone decided to like bring it to the global market. I think like how to embed yourself into the local culture, even though you're there for like 3 days, you just go out into like some small neighborhood and then just like live the life of how they live.
Is there a culture that comes to mind that you just are really interested in these days that you'd want to like dive into?
I mean, I've always like gravitated to like Japanese cuisine, but I think a lot of props should be given to like the really unspoken parts of Southeast Asia. I think Singaporean food, it's like a huge amalgamation of all the cultures around this region and like just the nature of why Singapore existed and how it existed throughout the years. Like people migrated from all over. Like my grandfather was from China, and we are surrounded by Malaysia and Indonesia, and like the food kind of naturally just kind of like mix and matches. It wasn't fusion; it was just organically put together.
Mm-hmm. I would love to read that book.
Thanks, man.
Great. Max Sung, thank you for joining the Taste Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Here's Matt speaking with the editors of Sprudge at the Counterculture Training Center in New York.
The Sprudge guys.
What's
up? I'm so happy to interview you. So tell me, I just want to know, you're in town right now. You're here for the coffee festival, but what have you had today? Like, just let's break it down. Like, what have you consumed coffee wise?
We had Guatemala coffee from Weiwei Tenango at Everyman Espresso this morning to start.
First cup of the day.
It was espresso coffee and then filter coffee. And that was to start. And then what was next?
We went to a place called Kopi Tayam, which is like a good Malaysian Singaporean restaurant that's not too far away from here, down on Broadway. And we had like this super good, really interesting what they call white coffee, which is coffee that's roasted with margarine and then served with a little bit of sweetened condensed milk with it. And Zachary, you had like good black tea too, right? Yeah, which was delicious. Yeah.
And then we like moved on to tea from there.
Yeah.
At Tay Company.
Yeah, Tay Company, which is in the West Village. It's just like a little...
Love that place.
In a little townhouse. Spent a lot of time in the townhouses on this trip. In the little townhouse.
Townhouse life?
Yeah, that's right.
Like private parties for Sprudge? Like book parties, like salons?
Kind of.
Okay.
More like salons.
Okay.
But yeah, over there in the West Village, which was really cute. And we drank some delicious oolong tea and hung out, and it was nice.
I want to cover broad topics and also more granular, nerdier shit. I mean, you guys are like the pitchfork of coffee, and I mean that in the most positive way. How do you feel about that?
Well, we've never given someone a 0.0, so I don't know how pitchforkian, and we don't have a festival yet.
Oh, no. I'm sure you could have had one.
Well, we may still one day.
Yeah.
But I would say successful indie media is so rare, I'll take any comparison we can get. So
and you can sell the Condé Nast for millions of dollars eventually.
Yeah. Do you have that number? Do you know? Like, do you know people?
But tell me what
I'm not
is your mission right now? I know you started as basically a blog, like a linear blog updating every day, timestamps and all that. But now you're a very robust editorial operation. So what are you doing right now? What's like your main goal with Sprudge?
We continue to do city guides. It's really big for us. Continue to push the cafe write-ups and exciting things that are happening in the coffee community that are progressive and...
Yeah. I would say it's a mix of news and culture. We publish daily news every day, sometimes a couple of pieces of daily news every day. We also do original editorial and reported features. A story on Sprudge might be 200 words or 2,000 words, depending on the story and the topic. I think that one of the things that's been part of our mission from the very beginning and continues to be a really big part of what we do is this idea that coffee deserves journalism, that it's a topic that's worthy of critical thought and intelligent writing, just the same as food or wine or any other kinds of delicious things that you consume and can spend too much time thinking about. So trying to create that and make a home for that in 2009, 2010, when we first started, was a really big part of our mission, and it continues to be a really big part of our mission today.
So what has been the barrier to get more people to think about coffee the way they think about craft beer, which, I think everyone has an opinion about craft beer. Not as many people have an opinion about coffee. What's been the barrier?
I mean, I think that because coffee is so ubiquitous, because you can get it for free at the oil change place and the bank, and it's everywhere. It's hard for a lot of people who have appreciated coffee their entire lives to think about it in a more craft way.
I think it's changing. I think that
sure. No
doubt. And this is something that we have been fortunate to be able to document as more and more cafes open, as the influence of brands like Counterculture, some of the other really wonderful coffee bars you can walk to, just in this part of the city, have sort of grown. That creates more and more, at least curious consumers, and maybe can start people down the process of being interested. And that's who I think we've tried to write this book for, is people who know enough to know to go to a cafe that serves nice coffee and maybe have their interest piqued enough there. And then we'd like to hook arms with them and sort of talk about what's interesting, lightly make fun of it, point them in an interesting direction, and hopefully come away with it all having appreciated it a little bit more.
That's a great answer. I read it slightly you start at the cafe level. That's where the education is going to happen first, and then you bring coffees into your home. You start getting subscription services. You start getting your home brewing apparatus and your method. Is that true, or is it happening both simultaneously?
The cafe level, I mean, there's no substitute for it. And this is something that I think, remain in awe of. Zachary worked in some really influential cafes back in the first decade of the 2000s. I have never worked at a cafe, and so it's all still magic to me. And when I go to them, even today, I think there's nothing quite like getting handed that perfect cup of coffee somewhere nice, and that kind of opens the door to inquiry. So I really think that the cafes and the baristas are that work that they do. If we can be an echo of that in the book, we'll have done an okay job.
Your chapters are really fascinating, or your organization, I guess. It's 3 main chapters: coffee around the world, coffee at home, and then the future. Is that right? Or maybe cafe. So there's 4
one
of them.
more. There's one more. Yeah.
Okay.
Future.
I think
home.
It's yeah. I think so.
But these are let's talk about the book. These are you're in these 4 categories. There's different rules, you're calling them, or tenets. What do you?
Yeah, they're gentle suggestions.
We've said that, yes, the new gentle suggestions of coffee that we were told wouldn't sell as well. No, the rules construct. I thought that was funny. The rules construct came in from 10 Speed Press. Our publisher had published a book in 2017 from a very renowned wine writer called John Bonet, and his was the new wine rules. And so when we got to start having the conversation with them about if perhaps we'd like to publish a book, that construct already sort of existed and had some DNA that we could sort of be petri dished off from. And so that was where some of the hook stuff came in. The books are very different, but the idea of grouping it around sort of useful tools or lessons, and hopefully done in a way that isn't
it's democratic.
Yeah.
You're super democratic. I mean, you say straight up, you can have milk in any coffee at any time. Because if you like milk, that's cool.
Yeah.
Now, I think other coffee books have absolutely not said that. They've said the opposite, right?
Sure.
So I'm just going to say, as a reader, I think that's why I love this book. It's one of my favorite of the year. You should all buy it. They really are making coffee fun and accessible.
Yeah.
But, can I say the but right now?
Go ahead.
There are some rules. There are some straight up rules.
Yeah. We have takes.
You have takes. Yeah, I like that. Takes. I'm going to go through a few of them and just we can riff on them a little bit. First, darker is not stronger. Like, what does that mean exactly?
Well, I'm just curious for people in the room right now, like, how have you talked to folks that think that dark roasted coffee is stronger? I feel like it's a common misconception that people have that you need like a French roast to have like a strong, bold cup of coffee, which is just not true.
Untrue.
I
mean, when you say strong, too, it's like, let's unpack that word. What does that mean?
It could mean a lot of different things.
Or bold.
Bold.
I think a way that's maybe okay to think about it is like you can have a little, you can have a shot of Fernet or a shot of vodka, and the vodka is very light tasting, and the Fernet really like is noticeably strong and bitter and intense tasting, and one of them will be like 40% alcohol by volume and the other will be like 18% alcohol by volume. So what we associate with strength being like a particularly encompassing sensation to drink does not necessarily equate to like caffeine strength, which is, I think, a natural sort of assumption and has definitely been played up by marketing for 100 years, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. You're right about gear. You don't need fancy gear to brew great coffee at home, but also good espresso at home is not cheap. I think that's a strong sentiment. Strong statement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you can buy shit for like $180 for a pour over. Like, it's possible to do that.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money for a at-home apparatus.
One certainly can spend as much money as you could possibly imagine for a home espresso setup. And in that way, it's very similar to
I'm just saying pour over, too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's like having an audiophile sound system or any other kind of rabbit hole that costs a lot of money. The home espresso thing, I think, when it's done well, it can be somebody's like crowning achievement as a home hobby, right? And those are really fun places to go. And like, we have this buddy in San Francisco, Larry Berger, who we've known for a decade. And when you go over to his apartment in San Francisco, it's like you're going to a cafe. Like, he just serves you the perfect home espresso, and every morning he dials it in, and he's just like so into it, you know? But like, very few people have the time or the like Larry Bergerness required to pull that off.
I'm here for the Larry Bergers of the world. I love that.
No, and we firmly are too. But for most people, I think it's our take, at least in the book, that you may be better served by patronizing your quality-focused local coffee bar and having them expertly pull you shots of espresso at your time of choosing. And if you want to go the other direction, you can do it. But if you want it to taste like that cafe, you know, you got to spend a little money.
Mm-hmm. But for pour-overs, for that first cup at 6:10 a.m., you don't need that much to spend that much, right?
Right, yeah.
No, the thing that I think that we talk about in the book and we sort of tell everybody is that you should be, for about $250, $200, depending on when you're shopping on Amazon, you can get like a Bonavita home dripper, which is essentially the same idea as a Mr. Coffee or any other kind of home dripper, but it's temperature variable and stable. Not to say anything bad about the Mr. Coffee Corporation or its subsidiaries and rights holders, but the Bonavita does a very nice job of being temperature stable and consistent and like putting out water at the same interval and making you like a nice drip cup of coffee. And then you get a little grinder, maybe get a little scale to measure the stuff out. We have a chapter about how scales are okay. And that should be kind of all you really
Are we talking about a hand grinder or a burr grinder, like electric? What do you...
You can go hand grinder if you like the manualness of it and you want to spend like $30. If you want to go electric, the company Baratza has an entry level home burr grinder that's like, you can find it for like $60 sometimes on Amazon, depending on when you're shopping for it.
Maybe the single blade one though from Krups, that's pretty shitty, right?
Yeah, the spice grinder.
It's a spice grinder. It's not really for coffee.
It's good for spices.
It's great for spices.
It's great. Yeah.
It's also so loud and will scare your cats.
Yeah.
Like, it's really mean for your animals.
Definitely.
Yeah, a lot of very smart people have invested a lot of time and energy in like explaining what's wrong with it. We tried to very simply condense it into like, it will make the coffee uneven, which will screw with your recipe. So don't do it. Get this. Like, that's one of the things in the book is like, how do you take this thing that like literally whole books have been written about and condense it into like 3 paragraphs and then move on. But that's one of the ones that we kind of try to do that with.
I like that you said the word recipe. I think it's really smart. And I'd like to focus on that because when you're buying all these bags of coffee from around the world, you're traveling, you're like bringing them back to your friends. How important, let's stress, how important is it to have an actual recipe to actually follow some methodology when you're making these different roasts and different varietals at home?
I think it's very important to have a recipe that you follow. I think that there are hundreds of recipes you could follow. Sure. A lot of roasters these days will have like a brew recipe with the coffee that they're shipping out, which I think is very helpful. But yeah, I think recipes are crucial when brewing coffee.
I had a person who's very smart and knowledgeable about tea explain this to me once and say that tea is like sautéing something where you want to kind of smell it as it's moving its way through, and you can like touch it with the top of the gaiwan lid and see where it's at in each steep and before you pour it. And it's very sort of intuitive and sensory versus making coffee. It's a black cup of liquid at the end. And so you don't know if it's going to be a really good tasting one or a really lousy tasting one till you get there and drink it. And that's sort of the same way as like baking a cake, right?
So true.
You don't know if the inside of the cake is raw or if you got the baking powder ratio wrong or whatever until you actually get to the end and taste it. And so that's where following some like guideline rules things, or even just very directly following a recipe on the same equipment with the same, trying to control every variable, can make it so your coffee tastes good.
Let's talk about roast profiles. I think you say roast profiles matter, and just educate us about what a roast profile is and how we should be looking at that when we're buying coffee.
Oh my goodness.
Well, we describe it in the form
No, let's go right to the text.
We describe it in the form of kitty cats.
Yeah, we were a little cheeky with the cats.
We actually spent forever on this because we every coffee book ever has a roast profile chart. And
Yeah.
we're like, we don't want to have a roast profile chart. Our book's different. We're different, and the publishers were like, okay, but you gotta have, you're gonna have to have a roast profile chart on. We fought it mildly, and then we finally were like, what if it was kitty cats?
And
there's 4 different, for the podcast, there's 4 different cats, 5 different cats.
It's actually 5, yeah.
Yeah.
my cat's on the far right.
Yeah. Your kitty at home is burnt. I think my kitty at home might be like.
So like we don't want burnt coffee. Some people over roast.
Some people do.
Some people love burnt
coffee.
coffee.
Tell me about that. Who loves burnt? Does anyone like?
Have you been to Italy?
Yeah, exactly. We can talk shit about Italy. Exactly. It's all.
Oh, I'm not talking shit. Like, no.
You like it?
Yeah. Oh man, if you can go and drink that, there is nothing like it. Like that real experience of being there and getting to drink the espresso, even if it's not like what your jam might be in your normal life. Like, yeah, for sure.
So this is like the diplomatic side, which I love about you, because most people would be like, the coffee sucks in Italy.
No.
But can't you love both?
You can. No, true. And it doesn't have to be so polar. Okay.
Put it over ice cream.
Float it with a little grappa.
Yeah.
You're like mix. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So roast profiles. Well, everybody's got their own deal for what they like for it or whatever. I think that typically the third wave style is lighter-ish than the classic second wave style, which we typically associate with Starbucks. Not to say anything bad about Starbucks or its subsidiaries or rights holders, but that's typically what it would get associated with. The third wave style is noticeably a little bit lighter, and some might say more expressive.
So expressive means it actually is telling the story of where it came from. When you're lighter, when you're like touching it with less heat.
Yeah, it gets back to the produce thing of like, this is fruit that came from somewhere and like a person grew it. So it ties back into that stuff. And then I think the great debate sort of within that for progressive coffee these days is like, are you going to roast it like really light or like just a little bit light or not really so light at all, but your cafe still looks like a third wave cafe. So what do you do?
People are like shifting in their seats here. I love it when you're saying this in the audience. Yeah.
It's a thing. It's one of the things that sort of within coffee is endlessly debatified.
That's why it's fun though, right? To actually dive into roast profiles. Like this is a fun thing. This isn't like painful.
I'm kind of screaming in my seat. I feel like the one thing that I want to say is that the further you go in roast, the more you can mask the defect in coffee that isn't quality and was perhaps purchased at a low price, an unfair price. And so a dark French roast coffee might taste great to somebody, and it could be sourced like sustainably. It could come from a quality place, but often that's not the case.
Right. It's the mask, right?
And when you have a coffee that's more medium roast or just developed, where you're really tasting the coffee itself, you can taste that quality.
Yeah, that's all right. And so much of the stuff is learned, like it's learned palate stuff and very much generational. Like if you never had light roasted coffee or even like medium-ish light roasted coffee for 60 years, and then your like brat kid came home
and served some lemonade,
coffee,
right? It's like lemonade, right?
Out, Mom and Dad, which like we definitely have both done. Palate stuff is so learned, and what people like and what they eat and drink is this very kind of intimate thing. So I don't think you see us in the book. We don't say roast profiles matter and this is the right one.
You don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can read between the lines, though. And read your website and follow you on social media and listen to I love your podcast. They have a podcast listener. It's great. Let's talk about the barista. You in the cafe section, like that job is really fucking hard, and you really make a statement. Like you need to respect your barista and treat them like a bartender and treat them like a server, and always tip your barista. And I think they often get a bad reputation. They're sometimes they have an attitude problem. That's like the cliche. But just to tell us like why you should do all of the above.
Because it's the right thing to do.
It's true. The job itself, though, is probably for our audience. Many do not understand exactly what the barista does, but there's a lot going on there. That job.
Yeah.
Right.
14 years ago, 12 years ago. Zachary, you were
10 years ago.
3 years ago, when Zachary was 22, he was working as a barista here in New York, and it was 2005, 2006, and very kind of early in the era of there being like third wavy coffee in New York or whatever.
Which cafe can we just say?
9th Street Espresso.
Oh, great, yeah. Establishment.
And in that era, when you were sort of the only place doing it, I think that it almost becomes like a suit of armor, right? Like the attitude thing, or it's like an us against the world. Like we know we're putting out this quality product and people really don't seem to appreciate it, but here we are, like making our art or whatever, and people don't like it. Or give us attitude, or some people really love it and most people are like, why is this expensive? And that has happily, I think for everyone in this room, and certainly for us as people documenting it, changed a great deal over the ensuing 14 years. And now there are, I walked past, I went and bought some soda water before this thing, and I walked past 3 high-end coffee bars just in this neighborhood in New York. And when that happens, it reaches this sort of critical mass of understanding of remember how people used to make fun of saying what farm the produce was from on menus? That's every place does that now. It becomes this thing that is less so terribly out on a ledge, and thus better understood and more appreciated, or at least hopefully more appreciated. I hope people that work as baristas now feel like that, because when I talk to people who worked in the kind of good old days / bad old days, I think there was some stuff about it that sucked, that was hard. But the etiquette stuff. Being kind to each other in public and a courteous human being is something that we both personally care about a lot, and so trying to communicate that through coffee stuff was important to us.
I do want to go back to Starbucks because I think it's interesting. It's such a big topic, but I want to just kind of recognize how Starbucks is important, right? It is where a lot of third wave coffee individuals have received training either at the barista level, employee level, or at the corporate level. Do you agree with that? That's my perception?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my first 3 years in coffee were at a Starbucks Coffee in Tacoma, Washington. And it was a great experience. I learned a lot about being a retail customer service person. And
your IQ about coffee increased? Did they train you on something?
Yeah, I think it was right at the beginning of the coffee passport. This was 2002.
Right on.
I mean, they were really big on the cream-based Frappuccino when I worked there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But coffee started to kind of go full steam ahead a few years after I had left. But yeah, I mean nowadays you go to a Starbucks Reserve and they have the pour overs, they have the nitro cold brew.
Yeah.
They're making a shitload of money in that nitro cold brew too. Oh my
they?
god!
Yeah.
I'm just speculating. But
Yeah. I remember we used to go when we were 16. We had the drama teacher who you could show up 40 minutes late and just reek like Camel red lights. And as long as you had a couple of gingerbread mochas for her, all was forgiven and it was fine. So we could go and hang out at the Starbucks and just really be delinquents. But if we showed up with coffee, it was totally cool. And that was one of the first places that I really loved as a coffee space that felt subversive. In retrospect, it was a Starbucks in the suburbs, so I don't really know how subversive that was, but it felt like it, man. And yeah, I think we poke fun from time to time, but it's from a mostly loving place.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
The food kind of sucks, so we can say that too.
The Starbucks food?
Yeah.
I mean, the sausage sandwiches saved me on so many trips.
All right.
I mean, so
It's all right. I just had to say that it wasn't all processed. That's my point. Let's close. I have one last question. Just give me each of you one roaster, one coffee company, and one cafe we should know about. We should be seeking out. I did not give you this in the prompt, so I'm putting you on the spot.
all right. Yeah.
I always say the cafe experience that is kind of my favorite cafe experience in the world is at a place called La Fontaine de Belleville in the 11th in Paris, and it's this roasting company that's been there called Cafés Belleville. They've been there for maybe 5 years now, and a year or two ago they bought a 100-year-old Parisian sidewalk cafe, and really didn't do anything to it other than put a nice espresso machine on the counter, put a very nondescript retail wall of their roasted coffee, and make the bread and cheese better. And otherwise, it is exactly all the same energy and momentum and vibe and rattan chairs outside and sidewalk seating. And you can go there for coffee, for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner, for beers at night. It's open till late. It's open first thing in the morning. And it's just sort of you can hear the accordion playing in the background. And it's it's amazing. It's just has become sort of that Americans have a long tradition of idealizing Paris and dreaming of Paris or whatever, but it's become for me the place that's my dream cafe. If you could portal me to anywhere in the world, I would go there and have a coffee and then go out and walk around and then come back and have a beer.
And France is another country that's slightly challenged when it comes to cafe coffees, right?
Paris is one of the greatest cities in the world to drink coffee in now. This is
always.
Yeah, this is one of the cities that's come so far so fast, and it's one of the ones that we have been very fortunate to have our website in the era that we have, because we've gotten to really document that through a combination of reporters over the last 6-7 years. But yeah, it is from being a place where it was hard to find coffee 6 or 7 years ago when Oliver Strand was first writing about it, to now it's one of the great places, not just in Europe but in the whole world, to go and drink a coffee.
And your coffee company that we should be seeking out, and then I'll get to you.
I'm going to say that's the cafe and the coffee company.
Oh, it's both. Okay.
Yeah, it's both because it's the Cafés Belleville is the roaster, and then this is their cafe, which is called La Fontaine de Belleville.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Some of the cafes I'm really excited about are the new Go Get 'em Tiger cafes in Los Angeles. Kyle Glanville and Charles Pobinski have put together just a really fun company. I love the menu. It's very playful but serious. And they just started roasting Matthew Patrick Williams, who helped us with the technical stuff in the book. He's the roaster there, and they've been sending us coffee every week, and I'm just always excited to open the box and get into
exciting. And are they doing retail coffee now?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. It's good to know.
There's more. I mean, there's more places.
Yeah,
we live
Sprudge too.
We live in Portland, and there's some really great cafes in Portland too. Our buddy Ian, who does Dead Stock Coffee in Portland, is also like strongly a must visit. Like if you're in the city or region, you should go in and go see what he's doing there. The cafe has this energy in it, and like the amount of creative people coming in and out of it is really special. And Ian came up as a sneaker designer at Nike, and then sort of went and opened his dream like coffee hangout sneaker bar, and it's one of those kinds of things that like it could only be in Portland, like in that city where it's all the sneaker industry stuff is, and it's a version of Portland that I think is very different from the kind of Portlandia caricature of it, and that's cool, and we like that place a lot too.
Well, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
The Taste podcast is hosted by Matt Rodbard and me, Anna Heasel. The show is produced by Gabrielle Lewis, studio recordings by Pat Stango, theme music by Steve Rydell. Interviews are recorded live at Books Are Magic in Cobble Hill, Brooklyn, and at Penguin Random House Studios in Manhattan. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com. Thanks for listening.